everybody. Welcome to Injustice for All. And we are going to be talking about Minnesota. A white American citizen woman was shot and killed by ICE agent on Wednesday, January the 7th. Minnesota now has massive protests going on because she was shot and killed. Congress is holding congressional hearings on the Minnesota fraud. A lot of things going on in Minnesota right now. I kind of want to start with this. So January 7th, 2026, hearing highlighted the Feeding of Future scandal, where over 70 people defrauded child nutrition programs of at least $250 million, alongside claims of billions more in fraud across Minnesota's childcare assistance and housing programs. Witnesses, including state legislators and auditors, testified that Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison ignored 2018 warnings, rebranded fraud as overbilling, and obstructed probes, prompting Representative Anna Paulina Luna to refer them to the DOJ for potential charges. Democrats countered by questioning the focus, while Ellison office highlighted their prosecutions. Chairman James Comer vowed further investigations and subpoenas if needed. Tim Walz has been subpoenaed, and he is supposed to show up in front of Congress congressional hearing February, I believe, the 6th.
We talk about the amount of money that's being wasted, $9 billion. That seems like an abstract amount, but let's break that down. $9 billion stolen from less than 6 million citizens of Minnesota, correct? Every taxpayer just had $3,000 stolen from their bank account. How does that feel to a citizen of Minnesota?
Minnesotans are so frustrated because not only have we had that money stolen from us, but we had an $18 billion surplus that Tim Walz spent and then raised our taxes $11 billion and left us with a $6 billion deficit. So we've had the fiscal mismanagement on top of the fraud, and Minnesotans are completely fed up.
Absolutely. And you've been sounding the alarm for quite some time. Why has it taken until 2025 for these to fully come to light?
The Fraud Prevention and State Oversight Committee was formed in 2025 once we had a tie in the House.
So when Republicans took majority, you were able to actually root out the waste, fraud, and abuse in Minnesota, which is why we now know about it.
Yes, we're in a tie technically, but we were able to negotiate this as part of the power sharing agreement.
Do it. Thank God for President Donald J. Trump for finally bringing attention to this issue. Representative Rarick, I'm going to begin with you. You've been working on this issue for years. You've spoken to the whistleblowers personally. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You have an understanding that 1,000 whistleblowers running an account on X have come forward to expose fraud in Minnesota state agencies, and they have been entirely ignored by Tim Walz and have even been retaliated against. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Even this morning, I got another message.
Well, in your experience, are their claims credible or are they politically motivated against Walz?
They're completely credible, not politically motivated.
In fact, many of these are Walz administration employees, correct?
They are actually Democrats as well.
Can you quickly give us one example of the retaliation these folks have been facing?
Yes, I can. In my opening statement, I mentioned that the most severe ones was that they would be fired with cause, so they couldn't have unemployment insurance, that they would be blacklisted from all state agencies, and I bet that it's also Hennepin County and Ramsey County, as you know, those are Democrat run, and much, much more.
Based on what you've learned, Representative, over the last several years, do you have any doubt that Governor Tim Walz knew about this fraud as it was occurring?
He absolutely knew that it was occurring.
Thank you. The housing stability.
Ms. Rarick, you spoke about the retaliation that many have experienced in light of trying to expose the fraud and the corruption happening in Minnesota. Can you speak more to that and what people are experiencing when they try to sound the alarm on what's happening?
Right. So that retaliation's been going on for quite some time. If you look at what Faye Bernstein said in a news report or Newsweek article back in 2019, it started for her, and she was heavily investigated. She was actually moved to a different state agency. She was, retaliated against in every kind of way you can think. What's happened now is retaliation has escalated, and now it's you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your home, we're going to track your children, we're going to make sure that you can't get a job anywhere else in state government. And for Minnesota, that means probably Minneapolis, St. Paul, Hennepin County, Ramsey County, Duluth, Rochester. You can't get a job anywhere that Democrats control.
That's pretty terrifying. Do you think that's going to prevent people from continuing to speak out on the issue?
Well, we are really hoping that with all of this light on it and, telling people that this is the retaliation, that if something like that does come to fruition, right now it's threats, although some people have been fired, that they have a little bit more ability to speak up and speak to us, and that we can cover them in that way. But it's been really, really bad, and it's been bad for quite some time.
Back in Washington, just left the oversight hearing on Minnesota. I mean, this thing is crazy. You have the governor and his team going after whistleblowers, state employees trying to do the right thing in Minnesota to explain the fraud that was happening, to get it under control. And it looks like Governor Walz, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, Keith Ellison, not only did they know about it, they were trying to protect the fraud to continue. These fraudsters were donating campaign cash to the governor and the attorney general. The whistleblowers who were coming forward were threatened. Their jobs were threatened. Their careers were threatened. And then we find out that the fraudsters were buying property in Kenya and Turkey, sending money back to Somalia. The money going back to Somalia could potentially have fallen into the hands of Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda affiliates in Somalia. Absolute crazy stuff. And the funny thing is, I don't even think it's just Minnesota. I think we just found out about it in Minnesota. I think it's happening in other states too. And it may not just be the Somalian community, but other parts of the country where these programs, American people are just being defrauded. I think that the bigger thing is we gotta, up here, we gotta put real teeth into these spending items. If we're going to put money into a lot of these programs, there need to be hard audit requirements, eligibility requirements. Obviously, there's criminal charges if there's wire fraud, but I think if you have elected officials who know about this stuff and we find out they know, they need to be brought up on conspiracy charges because they're defrauding the American taxpayer too. One thing I know about this town, there's always a new day and a new crazy here in Washington. I think that's why people are more frustrated than anything else. Because there's no common sense here. And when you try to bring it and put into these bills, the Democrats don't want to hear it. The only time they ever want to talk about accountability is when it favors them politically. And that's really upsetting. Anyway, till next time.
Mr. Balu, again, thank you for being here. Let me ask you, does large-scale Somali immigration make Minnesota stronger or weaker?
Certainly stronger.
Certainly stronger. Do you know what percentage of Somali-headed households in Minnesota are on food stamps?
No.
54%. Do you know what that number is for native Minnesota-headed households?
Well, to be clear, a majority of the...
It's 7%. There's a big difference between 54% and 7%, is there not?
Excuse me, sir, could I answer the question?
Let me move on. We've got a lot of questions here. What percentage of Somali-headed households in Minnesota are on Medicaid?
I don't know.
It's 73%. Do you know what that number is for Minnesota native households?
Again, you're using the phrase Minnesota native households, but the majority...
The number is 18%. That's quite an astounding difference. I think we would agree.
Can I answer the question, please?
Let me ask you one more, and then we can go on to that. What percentage of Somali-headed households are on welfare in general?
I don't know.
It's 81%. What about, let me just ask you, after 10 years of being in the United States, what percentage of Somali immigrant households continue to be on welfare?
I don't know.
The number is 78%. So even after 10 years, 78% of Somali immigrant households continue to be on welfare. Do you know what that number is for native Minnesota-headed households?
Again, you're using
non-Somali immigrant-headed households.
If I can just answer the question, when you're using the phrase native Minnesotans, the majority of Somali Minnesotans are as Minnesotan as any of us. They were born in the United States. It's only 8,000 of the 108,000 Somali.
Nevertheless, the welfare usage is astoundingly different. Let me ask you again, does that make Minnesota stronger or weaker?
Again, I'd like the opportunity to answer the question here.
Go for it.
So, again, the majority of Somali Minnesotans are born in the United States, as I understand it.
Okay, well, what percentage of working age Somalians who have been in the U.S. for 10 years or more, how many of them speak English very well?
I don't know.
About half. The answer is about half. That seems pretty low, doesn't it?
Again,
Your thoughts?
So you get an ignorant body of people that you're supposed to be helping. That gives you a very great opportunity to get into thievery yourself, embezzlement, misappropriation, outright theft. That's what you're getting all over the country. For several decades, childcare has been an easy something to commit fraud with. We had problems here in Tennessee with it. And it developed that some of the main actors were prominent elected officials or appointed officials, and that's what you're going to find. There is no earthly reason for the funding involved to be just thrown away, except perhaps as to engender political favor. But even then, that still would not explain it, because that's a total antithesis of the position of the Democratic Party when they talk about these funds should not be spent for the space program, they shouldn't be spent for defense, they shouldn't be spent for research and development, they need to be spent for poverty matters for the poor. And here you are using those channels to throw money away and allow people to thieve it. It just does not make good sense. And part of the reason it doesn't make good sense is, again, this needs to be understood. The Democratic Party represents an agenda. And the first statement on that agenda is, when are you guys going to come up with rules on how much hair a guy can have on his face and go piss in the girl's bathroom? See, that's the agenda that we're talking about. It's their business under the First Amendment. Get your freak on in your bedroom, that's your right. But when you start advocating this and you start taking the reins of government and attempting to impose a theological agenda on the rest of the country, it gets into being everybody's business, especially when so many get swept into office because they promise, I'm going to support this agenda of the rainbow. I don't have to say it out loud. You know that if you get me in the office, not me, but the individuals who are talking this, you'll get this, and this is only fair, and we're trying to be righteous, and nobody's supposed to be responsible because values, morality, ethics are supposed to be personal and private, and nobody outside of the individual's conscience is supposed to get involved in saying what's right or wrong. Well, that doesn't work because society is an intermingled group of people that are interdependent on each other. Whether you're driving down a freeway, walking across the street, or filling out your tax forms, or trying to send your kid to a school, those things cannot be escaped. And what you get is, when you start seeing something like this, it is literally the tip of an iceberg. Or more appropriately, it's like something bubbling up from the crust, through the crust, and you get a volcano along the ring of fire in the Pacific. It erupts from time to time. And I can almost guarantee you that if these allegations come out to be anywhere close to being right, you're going to find that there are a lot of officials appointed and elected involved in getting some kickback or some direct monetary or circumstantial benefit from this stuff. Now, the gentleman spoke of conspiracy. There's also aiding and abetting, which isn't conspiracy, but it brings people in. There's wire fraud, mail fraud. Anytime you communicate using the wire, the electronic airwaves, or you use mail, you bring the feds in on this. So they will have jurisdiction on these matters, and there's federal funds that are being allocated to the state of Minnesota that are being channeled through these corrupt programs. And it's just a disgrace. The other thing is, too, you don't want to bring somebody in who is going to be a burden on the country. You're supposed to be inviting in new players in the game who can contribute to the team. That's always been the scheme. Something they bring in with them helps the big picture out. And if you have these astonishing, well, not astonishing, but these large numbers of people who are basically dependent without being able to contribute much to the economy of this state, Minnesota, then something is way wrong with what you have. Either A, Minnesota is encouraging them to stay the way they are, which means that the people who have the agenda are in charge of not only protecting the people they claim to protect, they're in charge of taking care of them, so they manifest a means of control over these people, and they develop these means of control, and it gets to be more and more like another socialist party that we all know about. The German letters for the acronym are NAZI. That's Nazi. We dealt with them in the 1940s. So we don't want that anymore. And we're getting it because I have been saying over and over again, they're cutting back, they're restricting, censoring free speech, not on profanity, not on obscenity, but on ideas. Nobody's ever done that in the country's history before. I mean, they might get on you about the language you use, but never about discussion or presentation or contemplation of an idea. So this party has become very, very dangerous, which is why you see them so ferociously anti-Trump. It is a fact of political and social life with humanity that if you have nothing to offer, you attack the figurehead of your opposition. And that's what they're doing. They're trying to make him a Baba Yaga. And you can see that they are also, I'm talking about Mr. Trump, and then they're trying to focus in on his vice president, who looks like he's going to be the heir apparent to the Republican efforts to keep the White House under sane control with common sense. Now, I listen to Mr. Trump. I listen to political puffery, been listening to it for a long, long time. And his is no worse than the worst I've heard otherwise, and a lot better than the best I've heard otherwise. And it's nothing to get all worked up about, except for the fact that the greatest propaganda engine in the world, that is the American communications industry, is telling you that it's bad. It's not. It's to galvanize you to get an idea of what's being done to you in your name that lacks the element of common sense, practicality, and benefit to the ordinary citizen. So that's what you're getting here. And I think this needs to be looked into. And we don't want a real quick rush to justice because that fails. You need somebody to do a careful investigation and get every shred of evidence into the box and analyzed. Then you go after these people. You don't do this Tish James nonsense, throw something on the wall and see what'll stick, which nothing did. Though I suspect once they get another U.S. attorney involved, it'll stick on her. You get what you get down in Atlanta with Fannie Willis. You get what you get with Nancy Pelosi. Her entire life been on a government check, and now she's worth almost $100 million. How do you do that? That does not happen legitimately. You get this over and over again. You get this thing where all we can do is badmouth the USA, and you give the public the wrong idea about the ethics, the morality, and the principles that they are supposed to exhibit as citizens. This country did not get here because somebody handed it over to somebody as a present. It got fought for long and hard. And yeah, there's some bad things about it, but there's some damn good things about it. And it's a team. And if you're going to draft somebody onto the football team, baseball team, basketball team, the track team, you damn well need to bring in people who can help the team score, not somebody that's going to be deserving of being on the bench and being carted along and given a uniform and never get a chance to wear it on the field. See, that's what people don't get. There are consequences. You cannot be a child from the point you are birthed and through the cradle period all the way to the grave period. But people want that. They don't want to be personally accountable. They don't want to be responsible. Not me. It's not my problem. I can't be involved. Somebody else do it. Oh my God, she wanted to do it, so why couldn't she do it? Well, we're going to get into that in a bit. People get gunned down by accident, by purpose, by malice, or by good intentions, or by considerations of self-defense. So I'm waiting to get there so we can deal with how the public is showing an exercise in stuck on stupid.
Chair recognizes Ms. Luna.
Thank you, Chairman Comer. Honorable Robbins, based on your record before your committee, when did Governor Walz first become aware of widespread fraud in Minnesota social service programs?
I would assume that he has been aware of it since he ran for office for governor in 2018.
By 2017, DHS investigators warned CCAP fraud could exceed 50%. What was that information elevated to the governor's office?
Yes, there was an OLA report.
Thank you, ma'am. By 2020, state officials knew feeding our future invoices were fraudulent. We know that payments continued to the AG's knowledge. Did they continue to the governor's knowledge as well?
Yes.
Attorney General Ellison agreed on tape to fight Minnesota's own Department of Human and Health Services in exchange for Somali political and financial support. In your personal opinion, do you believe it is a possibility that Governor Walz also made that personal deal, or that he at least knew about the Attorney General's agreement?
I don't know.
Okay. I don't want to rehash what you guys have spent hours answering. We know that there's a big issue with the fraud in Minnesota. So on a number of things, I'd first like to point out, thank you for being here today, but because of your testimony and because of some of the evidence that we've seen brought forward, as well as I'm sure the fact that this committee, I assume, at Chairman Comer's direction, will be soon subpoenaing AG Ellison, I would like to make criminal referrals regarding Governor Walz as well as AG Ellison. As you know, U.S. Code 371 and U.S. Code 2, which deals with criminalized conspiracies to defraud the United States and establishes liability for individuals who knowingly aid or abet the commission of federal offense, includes willful blindness or deliberate inaction where duties to act exist. So I will be referring them later on today.
And the White House posted this: arrest them all, they are criminals. Foreign ATM ? Somali cash exodus from Minneapolis exponentially larger than other major U.S. airports. And that is from, I had clicked on the article. It says the cash moved overseas in luggage by Somali couriers from the Minneapolis airport was 10 to 100 times larger than the total foreign exodus of money at other larger American airports the last 2 years. Homeland Security Department officials said the statistics they have gathered in recent weeks show the movement of cash out of Minnesota was substantially abnormal and should have raised red flags during the Biden administration, long before the Trump administration began investigating it as part of a major fraud scheme that stole billions from taxpayers in the state. Just the News reported Tuesday that the Transportation Security Administration detected and flagged nearly $700 million in cash moved in luggage out of the Minneapolis airport by Somali couriers in 2024 and 2025 alone, a stunning total that averaged nearly $1 million a day.
That's kind of rough. I hope these citizens of the state appreciate how luxurious their ripoff has been for some people.
Yes. And I want to play this clip
See,
here.
you know what it is? Let's sort of shift over and stay on the same page, though, but shift to the margins. What you're dealing with is there is a cadre, a growing cadre of Americans that do not appreciate personal accountability. They like to be taken care of. They like to talk like teenagers. I know what I'm doing. I'm grown. You can't tell me what to do. Well, they don't know what to do, and they continuously get into trouble. But this group wants to maintain that adolescent arrogance throughout their lives and not be accountable for anything. It frightens them because they're singularly unprepared to deal with personal accountability and being required to sustain yourself. Now, getting back to that, that's this whole atmosphere. There is a group of people that we feel so guilty about because of their appearance and their association by dint of appearance with some people in American history that got badly mistreated. We feel guilt, so we should be able to assuage our guilt by treating their lookalikes as though they are pampered. So let's keep dumping the money in, and meanwhile, they're the slick type who say, we can exploit this and get personally wealthy. Look at all of the hundreds of millions of dollars, billions that are going into this program. And nobody will even notice if we get a cut of the action. And that's what you have here. And that's going on all across the country, everywhere that blue runs stuff. The city streets are rife with theft and death. And these clowns do not care about that since they're getting personally enriched and acquire status and position by virtue of the wrong that they're responsible for. That, well, we're responsible for because we keep electing these clowns. So we have to take our responsibility, hoist it on our shoulders and say, enough's enough. It's time to get rid of these charlatans.
First Lady Jill Biden making a stop in Minnesota today to tout the country's investments in childcare. She was joined by Governor Walz and Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra during a visit this afternoon to the University of Minnesota. Biden highlighted major investments in childcare through the American Rescue Plan. Billions of dollars in funding have helped states like Minnesota keep healthcare and childcare providers open and boost pay for childcare workers during the pandemic. First Lady says there's still more work to be done, though.
The challenges families face didn't just start with COVID-19, and we need fundamental changes if we hope to build back better than before.
More than 130,000 child care providers across the country have received federal funding. Last year, the state of Minnesota received more than $500 million to help the child care industry. During her visit, Joe Biden also made a pitch for universal preschool.
Now, here's where I'm going with that. This is why I played that, right? Because this is under the Biden administration. You've mentioned before, it could have been a week ago on a show over a week ago, to where when this fraud first came to light, you said that it could potentially be, that money could potentially have been funneled into political campaigns.
Yes, I did. That's what usually happens.
Now, here's my conspiracy theory and a question. Kamala Harris, when she was running for president, she had over $1 billion budget. Well, damn near $1 billion. She spent almost $1 billion or close to it. Now, that money came from the DNC. Is it possible that they can connect that fraud out of Minnesota with the funding, with the $9 billion plus being funneled into the DNC and spread out to different campaigns?
Yes, they can. It's fairly easy enough to do it. We looked at another aspect of this when we looked into BLM's website before they modified it after we started shedding light on it. They took down their statement of policy about they are for the destruction of the traditional nuclear family as their first element, all the way down to their support in the third from the last element of pedophilia. And they still have on there, as a matter of disclosure, every dollar you send to them, 1/3 stays with them, 1/3 goes to LGBTQIA, with which they claim a close affiliation, and 1/3 goes to Act Blue, which is a Democratic Party fundraising organization. So it is in their interest to push those George Floyd, Breonna Taylor issues so that they get contributions, which cover up or obscure or gloss over the fact that their management is spending large sums of money on mansions and estates in very expensive locales and vacationing and hiring friends and relatives and doing nothing with the money. And it also hides the fact that a lot of political enterprise is paid for by the money that goes through that, which is not supposed to be what it's about. That very thing right there is impermissible. They're raising funds as essentially a charitable organization, but they're telling you that 1/3 of what they raise goes to a political party, which is inappropriate. Now, that's going to get somebody in trouble, but we don't find that that is being openly looked at right now, and it needs to be. And also, this thing in there on their page, they have, please contact us if you are staging an event. We provide organization, transportation, and communication. They're telling you right up front that what they're about is helping to create or having helped create this violence that has been rife over the American urban environment for the last, well, since 2020 and somewhat before that. So it would be fairly easy for an intense investigation to tie in what this party has had some of its representatives up to. I don't know if anything's going to come of it because it just looks nasty for one party to be attempting to politically oppress the other one in the common view by the use of the criminal justice system, though that particular party had no compunction about using what the Bill of Rights is supposed to keep under control to go after the Republican Party. So what do we hear? Sauce for the goose? Tit for tat? I don't know. It's a shame that the Democratic Party, caught up in the zeal of their theological agenda, has brought the country to this kind of situation where the only other time we have had this type of animus is right before the American Civil War in 1860, 1861. And by the way, it's an interesting thing, there's only one U.S. president who has been treated with worse animus than Donald J. Trump, and that is Abraham Lincoln. He was probably the most vilified president in American history up until close upon the time that he got assassinated. Then he became a saint, but he did a lot of good, and probably that's why so many hated him. It's like the country is constipated right now. The country was constipated then. It needed an enema and a laxative, and the guy that was giving it to them was releasing a gush of foul-smelling, what shall we say? Anyway.
And with that, thank you guys for tuning in for Injustice for All with Judge Joe Brown.